to another artist conversation in our series, Pathways for Dialogue, Past, Present, Future.
My name is Tom Loughman. Thank you all for coming. It means a lot to me to see so many friends, old and new, come out to support what I really hope is a wonderful season here in Tribeca for the Foundation. A word about the Foundation. The Foundation was created not that long ago for the express purpose of collecting works of art to lend to museums and galleries. And they've done a wide range of projects with big museums like my old place, the Wadsworth, and great campus museums like the Campus Museum at Hampton University, and more recently projects at different institutions in the Lehigh Valley, including Lehigh University and Kutztown.
Allentown Art Museum.
And Allentown Art Museum. So this showcase is really about making new friends and bringing people together to celebrate the more than 500 works of art that have been amassed to date, and to help get those out into the world in the service of museums. Joining me tonight is a great friend of mine, as Linda said in the introduction, extremely talented artist, Berrisford Boothe, who just happened to have a great friendship with the founder and patron of the foundation, Jim Petrucci, that led to this crazy thing of trying to found a collection for free loans out to institutions. But I want to start tonight with talking with my friend a little bit about his own work, his own artistic journey.
Aren't you going to tell them about me?
I can. I don't have that sheet, but I'll let you tell about yourself.
I'm Berrisford Boothe, as in soothe, but with a B. I, as Tom said, am an artist. I used to show back in another life with June Kelly up the road on Broadway when I was a pup. It's really wonderful to come and see these works and see that large, massive piece by Charles Sayles. He and the late Charles Sayles and Al Loving were very kind to me back in those days when I was a young artist. One caveat I want to put in about the foundation is that there's a Petrucci Family Foundation, and there's a foundation collection of African American art. The foundation actually started before my being asked to put together the collection, the first stage of the collection. And Jim and his family had been funding underserved communities, mostly throughout New Jersey, for a series of years, which also was, sort of a catalyst for me saying yes, because they were already doing something good. And so I felt that to take it the next step, which was to begin to collect artwork and generate a specific body of work that spoke to the narrative of African American / American history, that made sense. I'm still on the books as being a faculty member at Lehigh University, but I was there for nearly 30 years. In the Department of Art Architecture. I fundraised and made it the Department of Art Architecture and Design. I was integral, as they said, in putting together the show at the Wadsworth Atheneum. And to wrap it up, I bought the first piece in this collection, which is a magnificent Avel de Night piece. A little bit of a side history. Avel de Night is actually the second cousin of Neil deGrasse Tyson. Same family, black royalty, and whatever. So it was my pleasure for 8 years to collect and conserve 430 of the 500 pieces now in the collection. I'm very proud of my successor, the director of the collection, Claudio Volpe, who worked with me for a year and has done an exemplary job of bringing new talent in and extending the collection to be much more dynamic. So that's me in a nutshell, kind of. All right, so move on. Let's do it.
All right, man. So one of the great pleasures of doing the show together in Hartford was that you spent a lot of your youth in Hartford.
I did. Came directly from Jamaica to Hoffa, Connecticut.
Hoffa, Connecticut. And you first started thinking about making art in a different time. Can you tell us a little bit about the time in which you were making the piece that's in the show, which is now, it's about 10 years old, right? It was about 10 years old.
Yeah. Now everywhere surrounding. It's the round piece, the two black men who do round art right here. I haven't made a square painting since 2000. I'll explain that later, but if I get a chance. 2015, I want to make sure I answer you, not just get verbose.
That's all right.
I was a professor. They pay us to say what we believe until we believe it.
In 42-minute chunks. I'm down.
So that piece, interestingly, Jim Petrucci actually requested that I do a piece for the collection. It did not occur to me as the founding and then active curator for the collection. It seemed a bit close to the vest to say, hey, want to buy one of my pieces? It also didn't make sense because the family, Jim's family, already had 4 or 5 of my works. So I was content to just be an agent to go out and create the narrative that is the collection now. But Jim insisted, and so I was thinking about this on my way in, and just to make it clear, you can see I've got certain deformities. I'm old enough to be that line in the Billy Joel song, Children of Thalidomide. So I'm one of those. And when I mean one of those, I mean there are 25 other people with thalidomide out of 330 million people in America. I'm the only black male thalidomider. And within that subgroup, I'm the only one with one arm. So hey, unicorn. So when Jim asked me to make that, I was a bit apprehensive, but I got over it. He insisted. And I went into the studio, and I'd started a body of works, the last of which, that series I recently finished last year, which was in Manchester, Connecticut, at that exhibition, that one-man show. I had been meeting with Jim, and I don't want to get into too deep, but as you can recall, it was 2015 when the former New York real estate something came down the escalator and decided he was going to run for president. And Jim and I would sit and go, I think it's about to hit the wall. And I went to my studio, and I wanted to do something that I wanted something to have a degree of potency and authority as abstraction. I used circles because the circle was the first thing every human being ever saw. It was the center of your mother's eye or the areola on her breast. And I've always wanted, as a black abstract artist in America, who got into fights with my contemporaries and dear friends about why I wasn't doing black figuration, to remind them that abstraction is a higher order form of thinking. And if you're saying to me that I'm escaping my responsibility to speak about black literal figuration and narratives, you're forgetting that our great ancestors who were brought here in the bowels of the ship did not bring books with pictures of themselves. They brought highly organized geometric systems that allowed them to build cabins and pottery and wrought iron work with the Germans. We came with abstraction and wrote the history of blackness through abstraction. So I am not going to back down from being an abstract artist, even though my graduate work at the Merrill Institute was figuration, and I used that to win fellowships and travel. Abstraction draws a straight line to the first few paragraphs of Robert Farris Thompson's book, Flash of the Spirit, few heads, yes, where he talks about those unique ingredients that constitute the Black American or African American experience, and one of them, of course, is improvisation, multiple meters, jazz, the ability to do the most with the least. So I wanted to take that energy, and what I felt at the time was a kind of apprehension that that individual was going to release something unpleasant into the fabric of America. And I wanted something that had equal potency, that would act as almost a shield to protect my soul and my spirit. And that had to be done in one act. So that wasn't a painting that I did some and I went home, had a banana, some coffee, came back. It was something that I waited and I went into the studio and I felt it bubbling up inside of me, and boom, it started, it moved along. Now I want to just interject before I get it back over to Tom and be clear here, because when we talk about improvisation, people tend to think of that as a kind of the Muppets going, ah, like anything happens, you know. Improvisation necessitates a well of experiential knowledge. You can't improvise if you don't know. That's why the great jazz musicians were classically trained. You can't pretend to invent something or discover something or to be vulnerable to what you don't understand if you don't understand what you already know. So improvisation is actually an act of reclamation, of digging into aspects of your knowledge that often walk very metered steps and saying, no, we're not doing that. I'm going to do a call and response. I'm going to put this alchemical thing I've just mixed and I'm going to throw this color down. It's going to do something and then I will follow that lead. And then the painting will demand something else. This is what we all do as creatives. I'm not making myself special beyond my physical self. All of us as creatives, in order to make something, enter into a space where we're vulnerable to things we don't understand. That is our strength. So that painting started and ended in one session. If you get up close, you'll see there are rings, despite having one hand, one arm, so they say with a focomelic little limb here. I use a bar compass and I cut stencils, so each painting is actually layer upon layer upon layer of improvisation. I don't sketch anything. I'm not interested in what the outcome is, because as I used to say to my students, if you know where you're going, you've already been there. So for me, that painting was a way to exorcise dread, apprehension, and at once create a talisman that I hoped could be strong enough to have its own sense of authority, to look at the viewer and say, I know who I am, who are you, and what are you bringing to my understanding? And I did it, and unfortunately, like a lot of my work, I sell them to collections or to private collectors before I get a chance to know them. So it's always wonderful to see them again. This is the third time I've seen my painting in 10 years. It's delightful. It's like a lost child. Sorry.
No, that's awesome. I mean, working meditatively like that, though, means that when you do give them away to the world, you, in some ways, lose the memory of the place. I mean, how much did this work build on the specificity of that moment? I mean, talk about the Trumpization of America and wanting a shield. Did that theme continue immediately when you were in the months after making the painting? And how does that look to you now in retrospect?
The quick answer is it didn't, because that was, as I outlined before, a specific response to the challenge of Jim to make a piece that was in a collection that I was building, which is weird, because I know what I was buying, right? So let's just be selfish. I want to make sure it's good enough to stand next to a Charles. I want to make sure it's strong enough, right? We're creatives. We all have ego. Come on, it's not the sin. The sin is letting the ego drive you. So my sensibility of that ritual, right? I'm from Jamaica. We believe in Obia, which is a derivative of Yoruba religion and traditions. So the ritual, and the art world, forgive me, is a kind of Caucasian chalk circle, which is the title of a book. And when you enter that space, you better understand what the rituals are. So that's another reason I use a circle. It is my space for ritual. So this ritual is in response to one thing, but the other paintings that in some cases stayed until last year. I have several paintings in my studio right now where, and this again is not just me, everyone in this audience who's a creative knows this. Every now and then something pops up out of context and before its time, right? Yes. And if you're smart, you leave it alone. When I was younger, I used to destroy them. But if you're smart, you leave it alone, because what's happening is it's actually a projection of where you're going. If you don't trust yourself with what's coming out of you, then don't do this game. But if you do it, sometimes things come out, and it's incumbent on you to look at it and go, I don't understand you yet. If your response is to negatively say, well, that you don't fit my style, so I'm going to eradicate you or hide you, transpose that onto a relationship. It doesn't work. If you're in a relationship with another person, same gender or different genders, and you say, I don't understand who you are just yet, so I'm going to get rid of you. That doesn't work. all right? I say it all the time, and I'm saying in this context, the thing I love about being an artist and being a creative is everything that I feared as a child is who I am. And embracing that allows me to walk in a space of constant discovery. So once I finish that piece for this, I wish I could say I knew at that moment that this was that. What is beautiful about seeing it in this amazing show, Claudia, to be commended, Linda, all of you, what's amazing about it right now, and artists in the audience will understand this as well, is I'm going to make a distinction. Creatives look at other people's works and see verbs. Non-creatives look at other people's work and see nouns. When people who don't create look at my work, they'll see yellow, noun, circle, noun, stencil, noun, etc. To answer your question, what's lovely about seeing it today for me is going back and seeing a verb, seeing a splash, a decision I made that I forgot. And when I see it today, I'm reminded of the decision I made. I saw the verb, splash-ing, scrape-ing, tape-ing. Art is a verb. So I found that when I speak to other creatives, when we look at each other's work, the only landscape paintings I love are paintings where I can see it as a verb. I'm not interested in trees and dogs. There's a million people who can do that. When I look at the dog or the tree, can I see the evidence of the painter saying to the viewer, this is the materials I use to make what I make, and they're autonomous of me. I don't control them. I organize them so they do something independently as well as give voice to my emotions.
Thank you. I remember talking to you about 2.5 years ago. You were moving studio.
You're wrong.
It's longer?
No, I was driving in today. This actually happened. So I'm driving with one knee, zipping down the road with my phone on its thing, and I've got your questions on the note section, and I'm looking up for the trucks and tapping and hitting the voice record to answer them so I can get notes on my phone to prepare for this. When I was a kid, I used to ride a bicycle through Hartford with no hands, with a Coca-Cola bottle and a Marvel comic. That's what I do. So I was doing that today, and I read that. I said, Tom is wrong.
Awesome.
You were wrong.
You didn't move studio.
I didn't. I've been in the same studio in the Carl Sterner Arts Building in Easton, PA, in Pennsylvania. It's quicker for me to get from my front door to Canal Street than it is for you to get from Long Island here. It's a dry hour. Boom, I'm in. It's great to be in a small town, 40,000 people, have 900 square foot space in an old building for $1, you know. And so this space I've been in now for just about 11 years. I'm in my 11th year.
And has that given you continuity in your work, or?
Yes. Collecting 430 pieces of art, as Claudia can tell you, for collecting the other 70 or more, is not what it sounds like. You know this.
I know this.
I lived in my car. I was doing about 24,000 miles a year. I was in New York and Philly 2 to 3 times a month. My friends in New York and Brooklyn are like, why don't you move here? My friends in Philly are like, he's a Philadelphia artist. I had these 2 groups. But I got to come in to go over to Swan and to buy some pieces in here at auction. And I got to meet Camille Billups and Bill Hatch, and I got to meet other African-American collectors up from DC. So there was a tremendous amount of experiential stuff with that, as well as extending a larger family of people and artisans and people that I worshipped, and having them invite me to their homes, like literally probably in this building. Camille and Bill lived on the corner of Broome and Broadway. 3,000 square foot space they bought for $3,000 in 1972 with a signature on a paper bag. Okay. So the thing about where I was going with this is that getting in the car, going to the auction, doing that, arranging for the carrying. It's a lot of logistics. Plus I was teaching at Lehigh University, and I was a dominant force in my department. I taught Africana studies. I started the department. I was ridiculously busy. Everyone in my neighborhood said, you're the last one in, the first one out. I used to be proud of that. I'm not anymore. But while I was doing it, it did not allow very much time for me to be in the studio, which is the long dropping crumbs through the woods to come back to you. So when I got in my studio to work on the pieces subsequently, I became what I referred to myself derisively as a JIT painter, just in time. I hated being a JIT painter. There's only one thing I hated more than being a JIT painter, was being a damn good JIT painter. Because people would come to me at my exhibitions at museums and say, "It's an amazing piece. God, your career is just killing. It's so amazing." And all the time I knew I was putting in about 10% of my energy. And I hated myself, honestly, because I knew what I was capable of. So I had to negotiate with myself to get over it. I was putting together a huge collection that was going around the world. You know, when we took this to the Portland Art Museum in 2017, I may be mistaken, but I think it was their second largest exhibition ever in Portland, Oregon. Outside of Portlandia, I've got news for you, Oregon's more racist than Mississippi. It was in the Charter of Oregon, no black people. At least Mississippi had slaves. I'm not being funny. It's funny and sad, but Oregon is like, no, you can't own property here. So when we put that show together with our dear friend, Brian, you know, I wasn't getting a lot of painting done, but I could go to the Portland Art Museum, represent this family, amazing family in the foundation, represent my friend, know that I was bringing in work of a certain caliber, and knowing that there was a desert. You know, we talk about African Americans living in food, vegetable and fruit deserts. I was in a cultural desert. And so to bring a major show to the Portland Art Museum and to have it nearly beat their top exhibition of all time. The Portland Art Museum is, you know, the Met of the West Northwest. Yeah. And to go there and walk around and meet blue-haired little ladies who just were so excited. I don't mean like, oh, this is nice. I mean like, I couldn't go get a drink. They were just like, this is amazing. I didn't know who Barbara Bullock was. Bill Hudson, the beautiful abstraction on the wall. They were just beside themselves. So I didn't get a lot of work done, but I had to negotiate with myself not to beat myself up. I was raised Catholic. It's my natural state. And so the balance, Tom, was, as I said to Jim when he asked me for the third time to do this back in 2011, this is bigger than basketball. This is bigger than hip hop. You're asking me, as a Portuguese Italian man, and you're asking me, a Jamaican American, to put together a narrative of Americans of African descent. This is as big as it gets. So I had to forgive myself for not being as productive, because I couldn't say I could foresee this moment, but I can't tell you how incredible it is for me to be here and share it with you. It's just astounding.
And how's the rigor in your work going now? I mean, that amazing visual library exploding through the rigor of travel,
right,
has got to have an effect on how you make now.
I'm a little one-armed kid from Jamaica who ran around barefoot and made his own kites. And when I went up to the country where it looks like South Carolina or Georgia or Mississippi, there was a spot I used to sit on a hill and I'd look out and I thought that was as big as the world was. I own it now, but I thought it was as big as that's the whole world. For me to come out of my career, which I'd built at June Kelly in my 30s and Sandy Webster, and, you know, to put it together, to agree to do this and to flip the switch and become the agent of this initially, and then find myself sitting in the home of, oh my God, so many people. Lewis Tanner Moore, the great nephew of Henry Asawa Tanner, looks just like him, lives outside of Philly. Or, you know, I knew this was going to happen. Can't remember her name now, but she was the only black woman who ever worked on a Diego Rivera mural. Thelma Johnson Street, you know? And you're in Oregon, in the country, with two black women who are the nieces of Thelma Johnson Street, the only black woman at like 20 who was working with Diego Rivera. And they got shotguns because they're out in the middle of nowhere. They got a dog this big. They're baking you cookies, and you're thinking, how did I get here? Like, how? And then they unravel her work that no one's seen. That's happened several times. Claudia can probably tell you since I've left what's that happened. Paul Keene, anyone know Paul's work? Sure. No one? You should know Paul Keene, Keene. Brilliant artist out of Philadelphia. Regionalized. Oh, he's Philadelphia, he's not New York, whatever. Paul Keene. I got to meet his recent widow. She's in the book, Shifting Time, that we just published. Little woman, this tall, gorgeous, 91 years old. I'm like, damn, if I was a little bit older, I'd hit that. Gorgeous. Gorgeous 91-year-old woman. I'm talking to her, and behind her head is a signed Picasso to her and Paul. Next to it is a photograph of where they used to live, and Picasso and a whole bunch of other people that I've studied and took tests on used to live on the same row. And I'm standing there looking at this. I'm going, again, how did I get here? So talk about influences. Yes, there's an aesthetic impact. But having Paul Keene's widow say, please enter his studio and be the first one to go after his death, and having permission to rifle through his most intimate and sacred things. Yes, there's some images that are registered, and yes, I'm beginning to transpose them onto my work, but right now what I'm doing is I'm going back and picking up the orphans I left while I was busy being a jit painter. So I have about 8 paintings going on right now. One that's already been claimed by a collector that I'll be going back to finish up this week with my assistant. And I found that to be really, really engaging, because you never bring the same character back to something you did 10 years ago. You're not that person anymore. And our what's the word? Our inclination is to go, I remember you, I was mixing this color, and you want to go mix the same colors, and you have to stop and go again. A more spiritual thing is, I've lost people. My life has been transformed. It's now a different dialogue. So I come in and I prostrate myself in front of you, and I hope you can give me some information, and I follow the same thing. So it's not so much that I'm going back and trying to reclaim anything, in as much as I'm trying to humbly go back into those spaces as a painter, and at 62 years old, enter into that space of knowing that I probably have 15 to 18 years, if I'm lucky, as a black man in this country. Right. And I have this legacy, and now it's time to give value to all those people who bought my work over the decades of my life. So it's an interesting time, but it's also incredibly freeing. I've had the kid, all the boxes are ticked. I've had the kids, they're successful. Our first son is more talented than me. He's in Florence right now. You know, it's all ticked. I've got to work with some incredible people, put together an amazing show. Afro-Cosmologies was ridiculous. It was ridiculous. It was ridiculous. I was in my hometown in Hartford, Connecticut. Anecdote. At 12 years old, I used to stand across from the Athenaeum when I first came to America, because I had to take the bus, the N bus from the black part of town, downtown, wait where blacks and whites mingled, and then take the F bus to the white part of town, mostly Catholics. And the space I used to wait back when we had winter, when the icicles were hanging off the umbrella, was right in front of the Wadsworth Athenaeum. And like some of the artists in the audience, when you're a kid, if you can draw, you did everything. Oh, we got to play. You do the sets. You do the backdrop. You're like a little 7th grader, and they're like, "Can you do the maquette?" And you're like, "Uh-huh." So I used to stand there, and a friend of mine said to me once, have you been to the Wadsworth Athenaeum? And I said, "Hell no. I'm like an 8th grader." And they said, "Why not?" And I said, quote, "That's white people stuff." Yeah. There was a wall, right? There was a wall, yeah, like Scottish wall that thick around it. It was a castle. It was like peasant serf. But I used to stand there in the 70s waiting and thinking to myself, one day I'll walk in there. And in this lifetime, not only am I sitting in front of you and sharing these anecdotal things and sharing my heart and bearing my soul in front of this incredible collection with these amazing people and this great director, but it's so amazing to me that in the same lifetime, I was invited back by this man to curate a show, and I was able to bring back all my elementary and high school friends to look at this incredible collection and to feed off of that power that art, not black art, art,
period.
gave.
Amazing. You've been really generous in our conversation about, no, I mean, in a great way, about the experience of being with the collection. I really have one key question about building that collection and the excitement that you and I shared as we were preparing the show, where you'd gone from the kind of the traditional channels of looking at art to finding people on Instagram and driving to go see them. And I just wondered, it's pretty easy to have a compass when you're trying to collect Charles White and Tanner and Doc Thrash. I mean, it's a different set of antennae when you're going for people that are younger than 50 and maybe not known anywhere. Don't tell me it's going to take a long time, because I know.
No, I was watching the clock so I can hurry up.
It was so much joy for you.
Yeah, it was.
To discover a new generation that's still emerging, and I'm just wondering if you could, looking back now.
Yeah.
How does it feel?
Anytime I start to feel anything greater than humility, I always pull myself back. It's not that I don't know what I'm capable of or not proud of it. It's just, being too proud is kind of being blinkered, if you really, like I've said to you before, either I'm telling the truth or I'm lying. And so to me, it seems the best place to be as one matures into one's life is where all vectors that used to be separate come together to make one person and creates one entity that is authentic, no matter whether he's speaking, writing, curating, drawing, whatever. Authenticity is the most important thing, and we live at a time where it is under attack. Those of you old enough to know Sherry Levine, when she painted the knots in the wood, and the whole thing about the art world is what is authentic, right? Right? We now have AI. What is authentic? So to answer Tom's question, as you come in the door, there was that beautiful image of the woman in the regal blue dress, Adama Delphine Fawundu, Sierra Leone. And she represents the first part of the two-part answer to your question, Tom, that I thought about while I was driving dangerously to come here. And that is, let me the first to walk on the plank and risk my life by saying, my professional life by saying, it's a small risk. The African American only exists in America. Seems really common, but it's crazy, right? If you go to Brixton, or if you go to Holland, if you go to Ghana, it's not that the African American isn't legitimate, but the African American is an American. What I found interesting as I got to the late stages of the collection, and what Claudia has picked up and done brilliantly with, is a shift from this being the Petrucci Family Foundation collection of African American art to the Petrucci Family Foundation collection of Africans in the Americas. We're all, as Nas and Damian Marley said, we're all distant relatives. Okay? Santeria and Vudan and Obia and Candomblé are all the same. They're all Yoruba derivative. We're all using the same language but coming at with different inflection points. And so we have a host of young artists, to your point, that I think started, you can stop me if I'm wrong here, Tom, but I think it started with Chris O'Feely and the Sensation Show, Saatchi, right? Back in Tate in the UK.
And Brooklyn.
And Brooklyn, right, yes, with then Mayor Giuliani rescinding the funding because Chris O'Feely put the elephant poop from the Virgin Mary, and he had a kid about it. So up until that point, I didn't hear many African names.
Yeah.
I heard African Americans who may have subjected or willfully changed their name to be one that has more Afrocentric, but I didn't hear anyone until I heard Chris O'Feely. And I was looking at a young African artist drawing in a way that kind of reminded me of Jean Dubuffet, but then using cow patties, which we think of as shit, but of course, in the shithole countries is actually, is duct tape. Right. It's their duct tape. It's what they use to put the roofs together. It's to keep the water out. It's what they use for fire.
Heat their
it is
homes,
an all-purpose
yeah.
thing that is produced by the animals. But our context was it's shit. So the mayor said, "You're putting shit on the Virgin Mary." Didn't even care if she was a black Virgin Mary, which seems that he should have cared more about since he's slightly, whatever. But he was more worried about the shit on Mary. So for me, at that time, a younger artist, I kept thinking, wow, this is the first African artist who's bringing a different aesthetic to the game. And I remember hearing the first little drops from African American artists going like, "Yo, man, African artists are getting all the play." And I thought, let me just hang on and see where that's going, right? Well, now, since then, let's see if I have the right one. I had to write this down because I wasn't going to remember them all. I just want to go through Kehinde Wiley. Everybody knows Kehinde, right? Does anyone know the Hort Foundation, H-O-R-T? They have a show on the west side. They used to have every 2 years before COVID.
Yeah, that's right. And
they have a huge building, and they put their whole collection. You could walk up, pay like $20. They had original Kehinde Wileys in there. Do you know what an original Kehinde Wiley looked like? It was a barbershop sign. It was a Nigerian barbershop sign. Well done. But it was basically, get the Philly do. It was like this cool barbershop sign. And he turned that into what he's doing now. Okay? So it was really cool to see the origin story of Kehinde Wiley. But again, it was like, Kehinde, what's that? Senegalese, what? And then since then, it's been, as some of you know, Amaoko Boafo, Lynette Yadam Boake, and Jadika and Keeley Crosby. You had a piece of the Wadsworth, right?
Yeah.
A brilliant
She's a
piece.
friend.
Great friend. And then Shabala Self, who I got to meet when she was at the Perez Art Museum. Brilliant young woman, killing it. Monica Ikegu, 23 years old in Baltimore. She's in the book. She's in the collection. Who people compare to Kehinde Wiley. Adama Delphine, the one I was just describing, I'll get back to. Imo Inse Ime, who is outside of Philly, but Nigerian. So and I'm just going to read this so I can get on it. And so many more were first, second, and third generation born here citizens. Theirs is a cross-dimensional reality, and each is tethered to the Euro-African or American-African experience. They're using the same voice, as I said, of black distinction, as African-American artists are, but they're infusing that with a direct, not interrupted understanding of the African lens. So we're seeing people who grew up looking at African-American artists like Charles Searles, who was making that painting because he wanted to Afrocentralize that in the 70s. So they're looking at Searles and going, wait, and so we have this borrowing, this sampling, this postmodern Laurie Anderson, David Solly, I'll take this, I'll borrow that. This beautiful thing that was happening way before Magellan hit the seas, the Olmec heads. So what we are now is at this point where these young people are coming in and going, I insist on being Cameroonian or Nigerian as well as African American because I need to exist and navigate this space. And those aesthetics cross-pollinate. So it's not African American, as I said, so much as Africans in the Americas. It's now more, cross-cultural experiences, sampling, overdubbing. I love that phrase. Those of you who know dub music, it's sort of an echoing of each other. That is no longer qualified by Eurocentric guardians who traditionally mediated how we define ourselves. Around the corner from me, those of you can see it, is a blue, beautiful sea aqua painting next to the circle. That's Dara Haskins, just got out of PAFA. When I look at that and I think about the figuration of a young sister who is not a straight white or straight black woman, when I look at how she's telling her story, her legacy, her ancestral point of view, what it means to be black and gay in Philly, And I look around the corner and there's a brilliant D.D.A. William with all the eyes, that dynamic piece where he's talking about growing up in a culture that would murder him tomorrow because he's black and gay, but he's using the gods from Voodoo to talk about their ability to switch genders. So how can you worship these gods and want to kill me? The hypocrisy within his own culture. There are these very complex, layered narratives that are happening and are in front of you in this exhibition. It's not important that you see it all, but it's important, as Tom was saying, that I brought in, and Claudia has done an exemplary job of this, bringing in younger and younger artists, 50 and under. I never forget my age, but I also never forget that I was young. I think that's what makes me a decent parent. I never expect my children to be who I am. They're different, they're younger, and I always try to make myself vulnerable to that. And the artists that are here, Nate Lewis around the corner, who else am I missing, Claudia? Tyler Ballin, give me some more names. Ife Chijina, to the right of mine, young Nigerian woman. Again, what I was saying, these African names, it's not a threat. America is a binary system and will perish as such. Evolution never, ever, ever says either or. It always says and with. And I had to bring in younger artists because I want and with. I want their voice to be as loud or louder. I want the older artists to be scared out of their freaking minds. And I want the younger artists to go, God damn, I got to work at this. Because that Greg Breda is murdering me. It's not a contest. It's not a competition. Every artist is having a conversation with him or herself, and you get to see it.
Thank you so much, Berris. Fantastic. Now, I think we have a few minutes, and I think we might have a walk-around mic. Could we take a couple questions from the audience, Linda?
I got one.
Yes,
Terrific.
sir.
I'm so emotional from you tonight, man. I don't know what to do.
I love you, brother.
I really
just met you tonight. I love you already.
really appreciate your soul, your spirit, man, because it's like I felt your spirit coming to me, brother. And we talked about this circle briefly, and everything in the highlight of what you said is what I did as one color through you. And I really appreciate that, and I love everything about that.
Oh, thank
and
you.
emotionally, it struck me in a way that I'm glad you said what you said for me as well, and I appreciate that so much. And it was really dear to my heart, man, that you could be up there and pronounce that the way I was studying it in my mind already. And it's just so great to see you in that light, in that spirit, just like I am, and how you felt about these circles. I've been talking about these circles for a long time, and no one has picked it up. And you came up here and said it and blessed it, and you blessed my work too. Like you have no idea.
Well,
it struck me, and I know you wanted to emotionally say that, just like you. I saw you looking at me.
Yeah, I did.
And I felt that.
I did.
I really did. And I'm going to be straight up. I don't care about my emotion. My spirituality
it's all
and my
good.
emotions is the way it is. And I'm going to give it and pronounce it to the world.
Thank you.
Because my ancestors told me to do that.
Thank
and
you.
you did it. And you slightly a little older than I am, but you know, I felt that. I really felt it, and I treasured it. And I want you to know that from my heart. Because a lot of people weren't focusing on that circle. And you did, just like I was doing. And I needed you to say this.
Thank you. I obviously
really
did not
did.
know that because I just met you earlier.
Briefly, we talked about it.
I love this thing again, just to your point. First of all, thank you for the blessing of that. You're so kind. Again, like the binary thing, we're all searching for the truth.
Yep.
Get off of it. There's no the truth. They're truths. Everybody's got a truth.
Exactly.
And every time we make a painting, not only are we having a conversation, what I ended in saying, and sharing that with you, and sharing the evidence of it with those creatives who can look at the work and see how the person who made it was thinking. The first time that happened was Van Gogh, when I saw his sunflower at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. And the guard kept yelling at me because I kept you know.
And leaning in.
Yeah, I was like, every time he turned away, I was like, he's like, yo. I was like, I'm sorry, man, but, you know. And I leaned in, and it just clicked, everyone. It just clicked. Van Gogh, I mean, how many times, what did you used to call it, you know, an art historian, we called it art in the dark. After lunch, you had soup and a hamburger, and they turned the lights off, you know? But I've seen a million slides of Van Gogh. And then the first time I saw one this close, I didn't care about the noun. I didn't care about the sunflower. I knew how much weight every mark had. I knew it. I felt it. I had made those marks in impasto. And it's doing it to me right now. It gave me goosebumps. And it started a whole different way of looking at art. I wasn't born with that idea that I shared with you. It was looking at Van Gogh, and I went, God damn, that one was quick. That one was slow. That one was unsure. And I went back to my teaching, and I stopped teaching talent. Talent is bullshit. I have an equation for talent. It's dedication or passion plus will over time. Dedication plus will over time. Kobe Bryant did 5,000 shots before Steph Curry.
Breakfast.
Yeah, Steph Curry was shooting things when he was 4. Tiger Woods was hitting putts when he was 3. Dedication plus will over time. Does that mean you'll be as good as Greg Breda? No. But does it mean what you'll have to say will be as important as his? Yes. Look at any documentary of any great artist, Warhol, de Kooning, any of them. You know, anybody who lived long enough for some young kids to interview them and say, what have you got? What's your recommendation to the young artists? What, you know, what's, and like they're going to go, excuse me while I get my notebook out and tell you my secret. It's such a dumb question. And you know what they all say? Show up.
Do the work.
Every one of them says show up. And that's the same thing jazz musicians said. But what if it goes wrong? Black jazz musician said, make a mistake, do it again so they think you meant it. Right? What are we talking about here but common experiences that are separated by race, gender, whatever? So the circle for me was my way of allowing black improvisation and my ability to go into my studio and just lose my mind. Because this dude is not allowed in my studio. This is a manufactured reality. He's here to talk to you and do that and drive his car and do cool things. When I step over into my studio, it's a sacred space. He's not allowed in. I don't care how schizophrenic that sounds. He's not allowed in. Because once I step in, the power of my ancestors are in that space. And they're not going to tell me nothing if I ain't been there day after day. They're not going to help me if I haven't sacrificed my time so they can give me an inkling of an idea so I can extrapolate on it. It's not going to happen. And that's true for everyone in this show.
Absolutely. All right, well, let's go have a look around.
Yes, good.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
It's great to be with you. Enjoy it.
And please come to the others and bring some folks. We've got some great artists lined up. Linda and Claudia and Jim, I think will be here on the 9th. Claudia. And then there's the closing. Yes. Yes. So come back. You know, this is my story. There'll be others. All right.
So much.
Come
Cheers.
back, learn more, and let's have another wonderful round of applause for these two people.